everyone. Hello and welcome into the day after Cleveland. This is your comments, my reactions, our video. This is our group collaborative project between myself and you, the audience, here on our little corner of Vikings internet. Before we get started, not feeling well, under the weather a little bit today, so bear with me. I'm going to try to muscle through this because I don't want to put this video off another day. Yesterday, absolutely, there was no way I was going to be able to record this. My eyes were watering so bad that I couldn't even see straight. So a little bit better today. We're making progress. Let's get into what you had to say after the Vikings' home loss to the Cleveland Browns for Week 4 by the final of 14-7. A lot of interesting comments came in yesterday on that video. It was a video that got a lot of attention, a lot of good participation. So thank you for joining us. If you came in from that video, subscribe because there's going to be a lot more great discussions coming up for the Minnesota Vikings as we trudge through this year that already feels like it might be lost after a 1-3 start. And we're going to get into that with these comments here. So let's begin. First comment comes from Eagle. They say, I'm a Browns fan. Your team is good. The refs were not kind to you. Hang in there. You'll win some games. So thank you. I do appreciate when other fans from other teams come in and give their 2 cents and join our discussion here. That's always welcome. So thank you for that. I wanted to point out this comment because for those of you who are new, maybe if you've been around for a while, you already know this, but I'm not the type of person that's going to look at officiating, whether it's good or bad, and blame that on the win or the loss, because bad officiating happens to everybody. You're at some point going to be on the wrong end of it, and then later on, you'll probably be on the right end of it. You know, everything regresses to the mean. It sort of evens itself out over time, you know, given more opportunities than not. You're not going to be on the wrong end of bad officiating more than anyone else, unless, of course, you're the Detroit Lions. That was a cheap shot. Sorry about that. So I'm not going to look at the, you know, as ticky-tack as the Eric Kendricks hold was, you know, everything else considered, I'm not going to look at that as the reason why we lost the game. Don't let the officials be the reason that you feel like you lost the game. Don't give them the opportunity to throw flags on you. It's as simple as that. There's going to be some times where they just get it completely wrong, and that is why we cannot get hung up on that, because it's going to happen. It's just the nature of sports. At least we're not, just thank God that we're not doing baseball right now because of the shenanigans that goes on behind home plate. So that's my little piece on officiating, and we'll go from there. Next comment comes from Tratorius. They say, well, at least we get to play the Lions next week. And it does feel like, okay, we took our, you know, let's lick our wounds. We took our beating against the Browns. We have one more home game on this 3-game homestand. The Detroit Lions are coming in. They're 0-4. They're exceptionally beat up. They have a lot of starters on IR. They're also not a very talented roster to begin with. So going into this week, it feels like a shot at redemption, and dare I say a little too easy redemption. So here's my take on that. Don't sleep on the Detroit Lions because their record doesn't show it. Their roster doesn't show it. But I think that they are, you know, they're motivated. I think Dan Campbell has this team motivated. The players are buying into the system. He was the right man for the job. Success hasn't come yet, but it will eventually. The roster's just not good enough. This feels like it could be a trap game. How embarrassing would it be for the Lions to come in at 0-4 and beat us in our home stadium? It's eerie. It feels like this is last season all over again, and we're going into the Falcons game where they haven't won yet, and we're like, oh, okay, this is our opportunity to right the ship. This is where we turn things around right before the bye week, right? Last year, we had the opportunity to beat the Falcons, go into the bye week feeling better about ourselves, and then go to Green Bay, which we eventually won in Green Bay. So think about how things could have been different had we won the Falcons game. This year, it kind of feels the same. I'm just saying, beware of the Lions, beware. Next comment comes from Fish. They say, anytime they go up against a decent defense and a team that can run the ball, they're going to get crushed. Prime example today. So it does feel like, at least for this season, and maybe we can extend this thought to previous seasons, but it does feel like for this season, Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer did not do a good enough job preparing what they thought was a good offseason for the schedule that they currently have. So here's my thought process. In April, I think it's April, the NFL schedule for that year comes out. So they knew way ahead of time the opponents that they were going to be facing. They knew we were going up against the Cardinals, the Browns, the Chargers, the Rams, the 49ers, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why do I lump all of those teams together? They've got good defensive lines and star players at key positions on the defensive line. Myles Garrett, Chandler Jones, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, TJ Watt. Aaron Donald, hello, is coming up this season. It feels like this offseason, they didn't address the offensive line because they were too worried about run defense because they got gashed in the Christmas Day game against Alvin Kamara where he set a record. David Montgomery ran all over this team at the end of last year. They looked at themselves and said, hey, we can't let that happen again. Especially because Mike Zimmer is a defensive-oriented coach, and his thumbprint is all over this defense. So they were just like, we'll figure out the offensive line. It's like, hey, we drafted a left tackle in the first round, so you give us that. But that's all they really did. I mean, Oli Udoh has been a nice surprise, but what else have they done? We knew Garrett Bradbury was a problem. It's unfortunate what happened to Christian Darrisaw, but those are things you've got to be prepared for, and Rashad Hill is clearly not that dude. So I don't know. It feels like to me that Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer, will do another video on this specifically. Failed at their job to prepare for the 2021 season if they wanted to actually have a winning season, because the defenses we play this year are pretty good. Next comment comes from Paul. They ask, if the Vikings are 1-5 at the bye week, is Zimmer gone? Unfortunately, no. I don't think that the Wolves are going to make a change mid-season. The Wills strike me as an ownership group that do not want to be the center of attention in the middle of the season for the wrong reasons. So I think if a change is going to be made, it would have to be catastrophic, apocalyptic for it to happen in the middle of the season. But I think it's going to happen at the end of the season, because that'll be the point where all the other teams that are going to fire people end up doing so. So they won't be the only team sticking out. They definitely don't want to be the first one to do it. They don't want that kind of attention. So I think that it doesn't matter what their record is at the bye week or the rest of the season. Change is not going to happen until afterwards. And even if it did, I don't think the Wolves want to do that, because they're not going to get anything different if they promote somebody that's currently on this coaching staff, right? Because it's filled with Mike Zimmer buddies and loyalists who think the same way that he does. So you're not going to get a spark. You're not going to get a change, and it's not going to be something that's going to be good for the team. It's just going to be more of the same and potentially worse. So I think Mike Zimmer's job is safe, at least until after the regular season, and then we'll see then. But no, I don't think at the bye week it doesn't matter. Next comment comes from Too Evil to Hope. They ask, is Zimmer's comment about not being concerned about the run defense speak to a much deeper problem? It kind of does. Mike Zimmer feels very defensive in all of his press conferences when reporters adequately point out flaws and weaknesses in this team. Mike Zimmer wants to believe that he has a good team, and he keeps preaching that this is going to be a good team. He says they have a chance to be a pretty darn good team, and if they do the right things, they'll win a lot of games. So far, that hasn't happened. This comment that he made about not being concerned about the run defense being bad, this could join the comment from last year where he said, I've never had a bad defense. It could become that level of Vikings lore, if you will. It has the potential to be that, because up until this point, every opponent that we played has 100 yards on the ground against a defense that supposedly was fixed when it came to defending the run, because they got Michael Pierce back, they got Danielle Hunter back, they signed Dalvin Tomlinson, they brought in Sheldon Richardson. We all thought on paper, hey, this is pretty good. Our starters this year and our backups this year are better than our starters last year. So, there's expectations, and Mike Zimmer right now is not delivering those expectations. So he has to defend his methodology. He has to defend his philosophy. He's got to defend his guys. So he's just doing coach speak. And I do think it speaks to a deeper problem, because he's not willing to admit when he's wrong until it's too late. So that could be something that comes back to bite him once again. Next comment comes from Crash. They say 1-3 is not the end of the world. But it's pretty close, right? It feels like it's pretty close to the end of the world for two reasons. Number one, it is now dangerously and way more difficult to make the playoffs given the teams that we have yet to play, the schedule that remains. So 1-3 is a hole. You got to dig yourself out. Is this team capable of digging themselves out of that hole? Maybe to a degree. I don't know. I honestly don't think so. The other thing is that history does not look kindly on teams that start in 1-3. So as of right now, as of this recording, the Minnesota Vikings are 1-3. They currently have an 11.1% chance of making the playoffs in 2021. And I want you to think about that number as we go through this video and as we talk about this team for weeks to come if their record does not improve. 11.1% is not very good. And you think about the teams that are still yet to be played on this schedule. We've already talked about it, the 49ers, the Rams, the Chargers. We still got the Packers twice, right? We haven't even talked about them. We've got one game in Chicago. We don't do very well in Chicago, so history's not on our side right now. It's not the end of the world, but there's reason to believe that it's pretty damn close. Next comment comes from JQ Vault. They say, you are just another negative man with a YouTube show. Have you already forgot how well our O-line played against the undefeated Cardinals? Well, first, I want to thank you for the validation that I have a YouTube show. That feels pretty good, so I appreciate that. I haven't forgot how well the O-line played against the Cardinals, and I gave them props for that. I gave them credit where credit is due. I will always do that. I gave Kirk Cousins credit for the Seattle game, even though I am a huge critic of him. The point is that the offensive line doesn't play well enough, in a fashion where it's consistent over the span of several weeks, right? They don't string together enough consistent performances that lead to more victories, that lead to more really solid performances for Kirk Cousins and his cast of skill position players. One good game sandwiched between like 2 or 4 bad games isn't helping your cause. If we could string together three really good offensive line games here, like 5 really good ones here, and then you can have a stinker or 2 mixed in, that's okay. I'm willing to accept that. But the fact is that this offensive line is going to have good games. They're going to have really good games, and it's going to happen. It's just not going to happen enough, and that's the problem. Next comment comes from Lawrence Daniels. They say, you don't know what you're talking about, ? One year the Vikings started 5-0 and finished 8-8. The 2001 Patriots started 1-3 and finished 11-5. You're a nervous Nelly. Well, last year the Minnesota Vikings started 1-5, and then they finished 7-9. The Vikings, I forget what year it was under Mike Tice, but they started 6-0, and they crumbled and they finished 7-9. The Jacksonville Jaguars started 1-0 last year. They've lost 18 straight since. There was a year where the Lions didn't win a game. There was a handful of years where, over the course of 3 seasons, the Cleveland Browns won 3 games. So things come in waves. Things happen. Different things happen to different teams. All we're really concerned about right now is right now. Okay. So in 2021, are we going to be able to be one of those teams that turns things around and finishes with a winning record, a playoff spot, and is actually able to do some damage in the playoffs, not a one and done? That is what I'm concerned with. You could point to a million examples of teams riding the ship and a million examples of teams collapsing. It's 50-50, but at this point, history's against you. When you have 11.1% chance to make the playoffs, it doesn't feel very good at this point. So it's fair to criticize a team when they're playing bad. Next comment comes from Just in Time. They say a lot of teams aren't going to do good against the Browns. That defense is amazing. Go Browns. Defense is amazing. Yes, I give credit to the Cleveland Browns. They're a very good football team. I really like what they've done on both sides of the ball. They've got a really well-built roster that they're definitely going to make some noise this year. They currently are tied for the division lead in the AFC North at 3-1. Who would have thought that the Pittsburgh Steelers would be 1-3 at this point? It's bizarro world. This is the upside down. Raise the bar a little bit higher, guys. Come on. I understand that you're going to have days where you struggle, but you should still be in a good enough position to win football games against teams that are really good, like the Cleveland Browns. And we just didn't do that. And the thing that makes it worse, the thing that makes it way worse, is the fact that the Browns played like shit as well. Baker Mayfield left a ton of points on the field on Sunday when he missed those throws to Odell Beckham Jr. If he connects on 2 of those, it's a 28-7 ball game, and we're having a much different, much angrier conversation because we got blown out at home. The fact that it's 14-7, I think, is cooling a lot of people's jets. But it could have been 42-7. Baker just played terrible. It was one of the worst games that we've ever seen him play. So you got to take detail, you got to take nuance and context and consideration when you're looking at these things. You got to approach things with a wider scope, right? Just because that teams aren't going to do good against the Browns, and they're not, it's true, doesn't mean that we should settle for being in that category. We should strive to be higher competition. Don't go in just hoping that you can compete. Go in with an attitude that I feel really good about our chances that we're going to compete. Right now, after seeing what we just saw against the Browns, where they basically gave us all the opportunity in the world to win the game, and we didn't, doesn't feel good. Next comment comes from Darth Viking. They say, why do we run the ball on almost every 3rd and long situation? It's one of the most frustrating things about the Minnesota Viking offense. It has been for a couple of years now. I have two theories about this. One is kind of a crazy conspiracy theory. Number one is the self-admitted problem is that they believe that Dalvin Cook is their best offensive player, and they believe that getting him the ball more often than not will result in good plays, progress, first downs, whatever the case may be. So they feel like obligated, pigeonholed to getting Dalvin Cook the ball as much as humanly possible. The other kind of crazy conspiracy theory I have about why they do this so much is not just because that the offensive philosophies for this team is stuck in the 1990s or the 1980s, or that Mike Zimmer just doesn't care about offense. I think that the way that the philosophy is structured for a team that is all about run, grind the clock, grind the ground game, then play defense, is that the playbook doesn't have the plays necessary in order for you to even attempt to convert second and third and long situations. Now, hear me out. Up until this year, they don't like running multiple wide receiver sets, right? That's why they've gotten by on just having Justin Jefferson / Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen as 1 and 2 primary wide receivers. Kyle Rudolph was underutilized in the passing game during his final few years here. They were excited about Irv Smith Jr., but he was lost to injury for the year. It's forced them into a situation where they kind of have to run 3 wide receiver sets right now because all they have is Tyler Conklin, who has played well, and then there's Ben Ellefson. I forget how to pronounce his last name. So this playbook wasn't designed for 3 wide receiver sets, and it's not designed to attack down the field. So I think they might not have the plays in the playbook in order to do that. So when they get into second and third and long situations, they're just like, well, this is all we got. Let's hope it works. And I also, a part 2 of the conspiracy theory would be that maybe Mike Zimmer's mental approach to third and long is that, well, let's get as many yards as we can to help the punter. We'll pin him deep. We'll play defense because he likes to play defense. So maybe that's it. I don't know. Next comment comes from Ghetto Lennon. That's a hilarious username. They say, who would be a good replacement for Mike Zimmer? Well, I don't know. I don't know who. I'm not really good at identifying head coaches that would be good candidates to take over and right the ship. I have my personal preferences. Eric Bieniemy is a name that sticks out. Brian Daboll is a name that sticks out. Maybe Greg Roman. I don't know. It's hard to say who would be a good replacement. What I'm looking for is somebody that's offensive minded, somebody that is in tune with the modern era of the NFL game when it comes to the passing attack, how the rules favor the offense, still good defensive strategies, more modern approach just on every aspect, more, maybe even a little bit more analytical, maybe somebody who looks at statistics and uses that as a point of departure in order to improve their selves and their defense. Somebody who's definitely better at time management and game management when it comes to critical situations like at end of half or end of regulation. There's a lot of things that I'd be looking for in a candidate to replace Mike Zimmer. I'm not sure who that would be, but I do have a short list when it comes to personal preference, like Eric Bieniemy, Brian Daboll. Those are just a couple of names. I don't really know who's going to be available, so we should revisit that later in the year when we figure out who's going to be up for the next head coaching jobs in terms of people who haven't done it before. Last comment comes from Robert Walker. They say, we can't get all these new players in the middle of a season, idiots. You keep pushing and right the ship. Way too much season left for your pessimistic loser take. I got a lot of haters in the comments, but I guess that's what happens when you reach a broader audience, and it's fine. It is what it is. My response to this is that I never said that, this is going to be an instant fix. I am talking about a multi-year approach to turning this team around, where we, go through the pain and the motions of changing the identity of this team. Because, listen, what we're currently doing doesn't work. It hasn't worked before. I don't understand why anybody thinks that it's going to work now. In the last 20 games, the Minnesota Vikings are 8-12. In the last 4 years, we have 1 playoff win, and that's with 1 playoff appearance against the New Orleans Saints. 0 division titles in the last 4 years. And that includes this year, because I don't feel like we're going to capture any of that. I don't feel like we're going to get a playoff appearance, even with a seventh team added to the picture. In the last 4 years, this team is 26-25-1. We all know about, the horrible record that Mike Zimmer has against winning teams. I don't see it. Outside of 2017, when we had a miracle year with Case Keenum. We went 13-3, won the division. Had the Minneapolis Miracle against the Saints, and then that's been it. I don't see what other people see in Mike Zimmer, this current philosophy, and this team. I don't see how you right the ship. You have an offensive line that is terrible. You have a bunch of one-year contract defensive free agents that aren't working out. Explain it to me. I don't see what you see in this, because we've tried this approach for 4 years. The Kirk Cousins era hasn't resulted in wins. The Mike Zimmer era has resulted in 2 division titles. One season where we completely dominated. One season where we were 13-3. We are not a team that pundits and analysts look at before the season starts and say, yeah, I'm confident that this team is knocking on the door. They're definitely a Super Bowl contender. The criticisms that I heard about this team heading into this season was from podcasts, magazines, whatever, is that they got a lot of good players. It could be a good team, but I just don't know if they're good enough. And I'm tired of being 500. I'm tired of being mediocre. I want this team to be a threat over multiple years. And eventually you're going to come to a window where you got to suffer financially. There's going to be hardships. That's fine. It just feels like we're always just on the cusp, and it just never happens. So that's my take. Those are your comments, my reactions, our video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.